Well, good morning, everybody. It's 9:30, and so I'm going to go ahead and ask everyone to please mute themselves so we don't get any feedback here. But welcome to Foundations for Healthy Relationships. I'm just super excited about this series. We're going to have 5 mornings to strengthen our interactions, inside and outside the church. And today we're going to be talking about a heart of empathy in a world of indifference. And we're going to have 2 teachers that are more than qualified. First of all, we're going to have BJ Foster. She's been a disciple for 30 years, and she's got such a heart for people. She's led ministries in LA, San Diego, Temecula, and now they're serving the greater Reno Church of Christ. Multi-talented, great family. She works as a student and family advocate, aiding the homeless and the most marginalized in society. And so I know we have a lot to learn from her about empathy. And then we have Dr. Jennifer Konzen. And she's done other classes for us here. She's a disciple who's served God's family in many roles over many years. She's a therapist, specializing in sex therapy, chemical dependency, and couples therapy. She's a professor at a few universities. She's written a couple of books. And, she's one of our champions of the teaching ministry here in San Diego. And so we're super grateful to have you a part of this series and a part of our ministry. And so I don't want to take up any more of you guys' time. So I really am looking forward to this opportunity. So let's begin with a prayer, and then BJ, I'll be handing it over to you. Our Father in heaven, thank you for this opportunity that we have to get into your word, to share our hearts, to learn from these 2 women. And I pray, Father, that you will bless our time together, guide their words, help us to have the type of hearts that bring you glory and honor, that will help us to connect with the people around us in whatever circumstance we are in and they are in. Thank you once again for Jesus, whom we learn all this from, and it's his name that we pray. Amen. All right, BJ, go for it. BJ, you're muted. You need to unmute yourself. Let's see. There you go.
All right, there we go. Sorry, guys. I just got a quick lesson in technology, so I'm sure I will mess up a lot.
You're doing great.
Anyway, I'm really excited to be with you. I am a little nervous, so forgive me if I stumble through. It's okay, but it's good to see everybody's faces. It's kind of putting me a little bit more at ease. But we're talking about empathy, and this is one of the passages of scriptures that come up often in Matthew 25:35 through 40. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to see me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you? When did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. All right, I just want to share a little bit about who I am before we really jump into things. First of all, who I am not. I am not a mental health care expert or a counselor. I am not a Bible scholar. I am not a kingdom teacher. So I am very much a novice standing before you or sitting before you today. But who I am a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a disciple of Christ. I've been a disciple, as was pointed out, for 30 years. My job, the role that I'm in at this moment, I am a student and family advocate. I work with the homeless. I work with our CIT students. For those who work in the education system, that means those are our children in transition. These are the families who live under the bridges. They're the families who live in the Motel 6s. So oftentimes we have to go in search of these children because just like our kids and everyone else's, their kids still has to come to school. So we have to go and find these children and make sure that they're there, make sure they have what they need. So that's really the role that I sit in right now. When I say that they are the most marginalized in our society, they are the ones nobody really wants to see. They are the invisible people to some degree. And then I am out now, soon to be officially an author. I have a new book coming out in November called Rebound, Lessons in Staging a Spiritual Comeback. But it's all really about empathy. So when Jennifer presented this and she gave me the different topics, I said, this is the topic I want to do because this one is really the life, the study of my life. This is what God has been speaking to me on probably for 30 plus years, but it's all come to an head right now. I have the opportunity to work on developing a poverty simulator for all our nonprofits here in the Nevada area. And Elaine Wynn, who is a philanthropist, she is the co-owner of Wynn Hotels. She was there and she put money behind it so that we can now take this and we're going to put it in all of the schools, all of the nonprofits. It's also going out into all of our correction centers. Anyone who's dealing with the marginalized population now would go through this poverty simulator that I've put together, which is quite incredible. So we're really excited about it because the whole point of it is even those of us who have a heart for people who are on the edge, we can make it, we can get to a point where it becomes, or they become invisible to us. This was a poem. I'm going to introduce you to a poem that really rocked my world and it started everything for me, written by one of the students. It says, "'Cause I ain't got no pencil." And it says, "I woke myself up because I ain't got no alarm clock. Dug in the dirty clothes basket because ain't nobody watch my uniform. Brushed my hair and teeth in the dark because the lights ain't on. Even got my baby sister ready because my mama wasn't home. Got us both to school on time to eat us a good breakfast. And then when I got to class, the teacher fussed because I ain't got no pencil." This is the reality of my students. And the author of this poem, Joshua, he said, "I wrote this when I witnessed a student walk up to a teacher and say, can I borrow a pencil?" And she said, "Yeah, you can have a pencil, but I need something for collateral. So why don't you give me one of your shoes?" The student took off his shoe and the whole class began to laugh because his socks were dirty and they were holy. And he said, it was in that moment that I realized the power of indifference. When the student comes to my office, they come to me hungry, dirty, scared, insecure, desperate, embarrassed. They're already coming to me from a negative situation. They know what position they're standing in. They know how other people have treated them. So when they are ushered into my office, they come in there very reluctant, wondering, how is she going to see me? So it is my responsibility to make them feel safe, to make them feel free, to make them feel adored, loved, and in the end, I can't even see my own slide, seen. These kids have become invisible. I had a student, just a couple examples, now I'll move on. I had a couple of students. You never know what's going on at home or if there's home to go to. But this student would come to school every morning and within 10 minutes of sitting in class, he would fall asleep. So in all of our staff meetings, the teachers were reaching a point of frustration. I don't know what to do. I can't teach anybody if they can't stay awake. So I do everything possible. I shake him. I say, go put water on your face. What can I do? So they called me in. BJ, can you meet with us? See if you have any ideas, any thoughts. After sitting with the student and the rest of his family and realizing home life was a little bit insane, I asked the principal and his teacher, I said, what do you do the first 45 minutes of class? He said, well, it's just kind of getting ready. The kids eat breakfast and we just kind of talk about what we're going to do during the day. And I have him the first 45 minutes of class just come and have breakfast with me. So we set it up that he would come to my office the first 45 minutes, and I got a cot that sits in the corner. I turn on calming music, and he literally comes in and he sleeps for 45 minutes. Then I can wake him up, have him wash his face, take him to class, and he's ready for the rest of the day. Sometimes we have to go beyond what we see and find out what's happening underneath the children. So my job when I sit with my kids is to help them to see that we are much more alike than we are different. So what we're going to be looking at today, I look at the similarities between two incredible leaders. We have Moses and we have Peter. But they are so much more alike than they are different. And that's exactly what I do with my students. I help them to see, I don't always know what's going on either. I don't know where I'm going to eat for breakfast. I don't know what I'm going to eat for. They want to know that they're not alone. So when I looked at the similarities between Moses and Peter, and I saw, okay, both were leaders of God's people. Both were brother team of leaders. You had Aaron and you had Andrew. Both sought after him when God called. So Aaron had to go and find Moses at Mount Horeb, just as Andrew went to find his brother, Peter, and bring him to Jesus. Both were called to be shepherds of God's people. Both had miracles associated with their introduction to God. Moses was with the burning bush. Peter was with the miraculous catch of fish. The miraculous fire associated with their calling. With Moses, obviously, it was the burning bush. With Peter, it was tongues of fire at Pentecost. Both were called to go before the secular leaders on behalf of God's people, with Pharaoh for Moses and with governors and kings for Peter. So you had a chance to see their similarities. God gives us similarities, and that's mostly for us than it is for him, so that we can actually bond, so we can come together with each other. That is my goal when I meet with my students, is for them to walk out of the office feeling like they have an ally in me, not someone who doesn't understand where they're coming from, but someone who does. I had a young student who came in and she said, Mrs. Foster, I'm hurting. I just don't feel good today. You get to talking to them. First you think, okay, is there something I need to call CPS? Came to find she was cold, so she was trying to stay warm. So she slept on top of the refrigerator and she fell down during the night. And at first I was like, yeah, right, that sounds a little fishy. Let's talk about this. But they had the little small refrigerator, not a full size, which is what we think of. But because the house was so cold and the refrigerator was plugged in, so there was some heat associated with it. She thought, if I could just lay on top of the refrigerator, I'll be warm tonight. And she fell off in the middle of the night. So we have to obviously pull in CPS. We have to do other things. But besides that, it's okay, well, let's get you some mattresses to sleep on. Let's get you some blankets and some pillows. So it's being compassionate enough and empathizing enough to get in there and look beyond the problem, and let's see if we can find the root of the problem. With Peter and Moses, again, the whole point of the similarities is to help us to bond with each other. But I want us to see the differences. There's an evolution that takes place. I said the evolution of God's deliverer of people. The differences between Moses and Peter. Moses was called to deliver his own people like him. And there's something about going to people like us. You know, it might be challenging. You might want to pull somebody's hair out. You might want to go, okay, girl, you need to just snap out of it. But there's a relatability. I get you and you get me. And because of that, the call, what Moses needed, what it was going to take for him to lead his people was courage. I just need to be brave enough to do it. I know them. They know me. We're from the same stuff. So that was his calling, which was different from Peter's, because God was calling Peter to deliver a perceived enemy, those unlike him. It's different when you're going to someone who's unlike you. If you think about all the racial disharmony, unrest that we're dealing with right now, it's people unlike us. and people are in turmoil because of it. So in order for Peter to answer the call, it wasn't going to just take courage. It was going to take empathy. How can I relate to these people who I have a history with that is not very good? Peter is coming from a situation where they have really been opposed by the Romans, by the Gentiles, all their lives. So the last thing he wants to do is to go and be amongst these people. So God was calling him to something that was very resistant within him, which is why we see in the infamous, I think it's up next, John 21. It's one of those passages of scriptures. We all know it. We've heard it. We love it. It's just one of those. But I think it was Jesus developing the heart of empathy that Peter was going to need in order to get the job done that he was being called to. In John 21, we know when he talks about, do you truly love me more than these? And we've heard it and we know all about the agape love and all that good stuff. I'm not refuting that, but I don't want to harp on that. I want to point out something I thought was very interesting, is that he says, Simon, son of John. That was the original name for Peter. So you've had Jesus walking with Peter and he's renamed him. I'm not calling you Peter, you are the rock. And he's Peter, he's Peter, he's Peter. But in this moment, he says, Simon, son of John, which means the wavering one. Do you truly love me more than these? He returns, he takes Peter back. Let's go back to your original space. How you really feel, you're wavering, you have issues going on. So I want you to remember who you were before me and who you are now that you're walking with me. So Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? And we know the response, well, yeah, Lord. He's, Yeah, let's ask that question again. Simon, son of John. Think about if someone who usually calls you BJ. BJ is endearing. That's my name, but it's not my legal name. When I hear my legal name, Belinda Joyce, my ear goes, uh-oh. I'm either in trouble or I really need to pay attention. That was the equivalent of Jesus saying, Simon, son of John. He was getting his attention. He said, let me take you back. Wavering one, do you truly love me? Not the rock that everybody has come to look upon and adore. Wavering one, do you truly love me? Like, well, yeah, okay. Wavering one, do you really love me? Well, yeah. Okay, wavering one. So he's asking him because he's preparing him. He's developing something in him. And I asked the question, we've got to be willing to be placed in an uncomfortable setting. He was preparing Peter to go into an uncomfortable setting. So he was asking, do you love me enough to let me take you where you don't want to go? It says, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. I know you guys, you know what it's like to dress yourself, or if you have little kids who dress themselves and they think they look good, they don't look good at all. And then you have to try to convince them that they don't look good and they need to change those clothes. That is what Jesus is saying. He said, when you were young, you dressed yourself. And now that you're older, I'll need you to stretch out your arms, surrender. Let me dress you and lead you where you don't want to go. It was all in preparation to lead Peter to here. The mission itself, which is an accident. I know we talk a lot about what he was, he's got to feed the sheep. He's got to take care of the lambs. He's got to do all this stuff. But I think we tend to, or at least I did, think in terms of the church that we're working on or the people that are lost around us. But he was sending him to people that were opposing him. So there was a buildup to it. I said the lead up, you got the fellowship of the believers. We see Peter working with the sheep. He's working with them. Okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to give one to another. We're going to make sure we meet each other's needs. And we see that, and that comes relatively easy. And then we see him having to heal the lame beggar. He watched Jesus do this before. But I think Jesus was looking at his heart going, okay, how do you feel? Here's somebody not like you, someone down on their luck. How are you going to treat them? How are you going to respond to them? And now you're before the Sanhedrin. Oh, those people, we don't even like those people. Okay, Peter, what's your heart towards them? How are you going to treat them? Ananias and Sapphira. Now you've got Peter, the big leader, and he's laid out his laws. He's got the keys, but they disobeyed it. Okay, Peter, what's your heart towards them? How are you going to treat them? We see that further on, we see the apostles being persecuted and thrown in jail unfairly, injustice, lack of mercy. Peter, how's your heart? How are you going to deal with it? The stoning of Stephen. Now they've spent all this time diligently praying and making sure they had the right people in place, and now they're watching Stephen get stoned. Peter, what's happening in your heart? How do you feel about it? Not only that, but standing there, holding the purse, cheering them on, was this little guy called Saul. And now he witnesses Saul's conversion. And God is saying, Peter, what's going on inside of your heart? Do you truly love me? That question, do you really love me? It comes back. Because it is a matter of what is going on into your heart, because I'm about to send you to some people you don't feel so wonderful and warm and fuzzy about. So the test, we saw that Peter unlocked the door for the Jews. That was easy. They're like him. Then God took it a step further to the Samaritans, half Jews. You go, yeah, okay, well, they got a little bit of me in them, so I guess I can live with that. And then he took him to the end of the road. He says, okay, we're going to go all the way to the Gentiles. How do you feel in your heart? Because I'm asking you to go to my little lambs, my babies, my little sheep. They don't know me at all. Unlike the Jews, you guys know me. These people don't know me at all. Will you love these babies the way you would love your babies? There was a test going on. He was preparing Peter's heart, giving him a heart of empathy for people that he was going to have to come in contact with. Those people, those Gentiles, Jews, that the Jews had hostility towards these people because they had been opposed by them. They saw them as immoral and undeserving. There were social differences between them. They were idol worshipers. They were unclean. I think about when I went to Johannesburg, they still had the watchtowers from apartheid still standing. And when you drive past it, it just looms above you. I am not from South Africa. I did not live through it, but I felt the presence of the oppression. So I can only imagine for those who were actually raised in it, what it must have felt like to walk past those kind of towers day after day after day. So it gives us an idea just of the feelings, what was going on inside of Peter and what Jesus was calling him to. He was saying, I am calling you to a heart of empathy, not to those who have empathized with you. That was not the point. I need you to represent me. So what we see, and I'll actually, as we go to Acts 10, let me actually get myself there. There's some important things that starts to take place. We see the conversion of two different people, groups of people coming together. In Acts 10 with Cornelius, starting in verse 1, the Lord calls him. It says, at Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion in what was known as the Italian regiment. He and his family were devout and God-fearing. He gave generously to those in need and prayed to God regularly. One day at about 3 p.m, he had a vision. He distinctly saw an angel of God who came to him and said, Cornelius. Cornelius stared at him in fear. What is it, Lord? He asked. The angel answered, your prayers and gifts to the poor have come up as a memorial offering before God. Now send men to Joppa to bring back a man named Simon, who is called Peter. He is staying with Simon the tanner, whose house is by the sea. So we have God preparing Cornelius. And then on the same side, and I won't read it all for the sake of time, we see Peter. When he's hungry, this is in verses 9 through 15, I'm not going to read it all, but he talks about, all right, I'm hungry. So what does God do? He opens up heaven, sends down this sheet with all these different animals. And he says to him, Peter, get up, kill and eat. Peter's response in 14, surely not, Lord. I have never eaten anything impure or unclean. And the voice spoke to him a second time, saying, do not call anything impure that God has made clean. He was preparing his heart. He was doing a heart check. We know that it was not about food. It was about the people he was about to get him to walk into. He's saying, do not call anything, anyone that I have made clean, unclean. Peter had to wrestle with that. What is going on in my heart? I put down here at the bottom, says, for the Christian, empathy is developed. I think so often we pray for it, we study about it, but Peter gained empathy by allowing God to throw him into difficult, uncomfortable situations. What difficult, uncomfortable situation are you allowing God to throw you into? I think we have to be careful. Sometimes we can live in our kingdom bubble, which means we're kind of surrounded by people just like us. The best thing in the world for me is God thrust me out into a world unlike mine. And it forced me to open up my eyes to people who were so radically different that I had to check my heart. He says, BJ, how do you feel about these people? How do you feel about the fact that this person doesn't work? When I called you to take care of their children, I'm not asking you to place judgment on the parents. I'm asking you, how do you feel about these students? It's really been a wonderful heart check for me. But empathy is developed and it is learned out of obedience. I have learned that I am still in the process of learning more than anything right now, obedience. I stopped talking for a long time. I just shut down. God said, BJ, I need you to speak. And for a long time, I said, no, I'm done. I'm hiding out. He said, no, 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 I need your voice. When Jennifer asked me to do this, normally, if she had caught me a week early, no, just kidding. Normally, my answer would have been no. But about 3-4 months ago, I said, God, I surrender. What do you want me to do? From this point on, he says, I need you to answer yes when I ask you to do something. And I've simply from this point been saying yes. So when she asked the question, will you do this class? I pretty much immediately said yes. Now I was sweating and beating myself up over it afterwards, but I did say yes. Because empathy is developed and learned out of obedience to God. The lesson for the church. The psychological identification with or vicarious experiencing of the feelings and thoughts and attitudes of another. Are we feeling what each other feels? Are we taking the time to really get a chance to connect one to another? This is one of our students when we did the poverty simulation. He's from an immigrant family. And he was sharing with us how people make him feel because his English isn't very good and he just felt like, I don't fit, I don't belong. So what we did, we commissioned an artist to sit with some of the students and just talk to them, find out what you can find out about them. And then he developed this whole portrait around who they are. You probably can't quite see it, but all the things that he loves, the things that he does, who his parents are. So you have detergent because his mom is a cleaner. You have all sorts of things. He has Pringles. He loves listening to music. So the whole portrait is devised of who he is, not who we see. And you get a chance to see the pride. When they witness their own art, they're like, whoa, that's me. I do that, and I love this, and I love math. And they forget what they're made of. because all they're presented with day after day, what we see when we first see them. I just want to give you one word, and I'm done, so Jennifer, get yourself ready. The greeting in Swahili that people greet each other with is one single word. I want to introduce you to it. Sawubona. Sawubona is how they greet one another, and it simply means, we see you. The me inside, the I inside of me sees who is inside of you. God is calling us, if we are truly going to have empathy for one another, we have got to get to a point where we see each other. Not the things around us, not what we bring to the table, but who am I? My kids, when they come to me, more than anything else, they want to be seen. They want to feel that when they walk out of my office, they are the best things in sliced cheese in my eyes. It's up to me to help them feel that. Lastly, I wrote down, it's difficult to see the plight of people when you don't see them. Until we can see people, we'll never understand the plight. So when you say sawubona, it's an agreement. How do I have to be human being to human being so that you can be most free? Empathy. If we're going to develop God's heart for empathy, we have to allow him to put us in those uncomfortable, difficult situations and be willing to try and fail and try and fail and try and fail, as Peter did, until he finally succeeded. Last thing, I know I said this, but I got to put this in here. I want us to see Peter's final response. Look in Acts chapter 10. Down in 23, the second half of 23, after Peter had been invited into the house, it says, the next day, Peter started out with them, and some of the believers from Joppa went along. The following day, he arrived in Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting him and called together his relatives and close friends. And here's the part I want us to see. As Peter entered the house, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet in reverence. But Peter made him get up. Stand up, he said. I am only a man myself. He walks into the house, and Cornelius, the oppressor, falls at his feet, the oppressed. So many things could have transpired in that moment had God not done some changes in Peter's heart. That interaction could have been very different when you have the oppressor falling at the feet of the oppressed. But what did we see? In some passages, it says that Peter lifted him up. Peter said, stand up. I am only a man myself. The fact that he said myself points out that he is now looking at this Gentile also as a man. I see you. You get a chance to see the development of the relationships being healed that needed to be healed, all because of that one word, empathy. Anyway, that's all, guys. Thank you so much. I'm sure it's all over the map, but thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, great. Wow, that was really awesome and a little intimidating because BJ, wow, thank you for sharing not just your not just your knowledge, but your heart for the battle. It's hard. It's hard to get to empathy. And James actually asked me to introduce BJ, and then we switched around and James introduced, but I have to say this. I have felt BJ's empathy through the years. I've been through a lot. BJ's been there for me. She has ached over me with my kids. I've called her at some of the toughest times in my life. And so she lives what she's teaching today. So, amen. Thank you so much, BJ. And we could all just turn off our screens right now and be great. I think what I'm hopefully going to give you for the rest of this time is some practical stuff on how to develop it on a real daily basis. I do think the first thing that I want to just remind ourselves of is that God is the God of empathy. You know, in 1 Corinthians, it actually says that he is the Father of comfort and the God of compassion. He is the God of empathy. We see it in Jesus. We do not have a high priest who was unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who was tempted in every way, just as we are. So he gets it. So I'm going to be talking about how do we get in people's shoes? How do we get in their shoes so we can see things from their perspective and feel empathy? But I think it helps first to recognize that he is the very example of empathy. He as in God, he as in Jesus. I love this out of Isaiah 63. In all their distress, he too was distressed. I mean, you had a rough day someday this last week or this last month. You know, I see clients, you know, all week, and I've been asking them this last week, so how's your air? And the week before that, it was, so are you feeling safe? And the week before that was, you know, I mean, this last 6 months, oh my goodness, the things that people are going through with health and fires and their jobs, and they've got their kids underneath their feet and they're trying to work. I love this scripture. In all their distress, he too was distressed. God literally says, I get it. I'm with you in it. My feet are in your shoes. So I think it's important that we recognize his heart. And in fact, Psalm 56, you have put my tears in your bottle. I mean, there's the song, I felt every teardrop when in darkness you cried. I love that song because it expresses the heart of God, which is when you cry, he's crying with you. He's got his arms around.
Yeah, bear with us, guys. There was a technological glitch here, but I think we'll get her back on here in just a second. While we're waiting for her, just want to let you know that if now would be a great time if you need to go to the bathroom or get a water break. Go ahead and do that real quick. But just so you guys know, as soon as she gets back, she's going to speak for another 20-25 minutes, and then we'll have a time of question and answer here with both BJ and Jennifer. And so if you want to be thinking about some questions, then what I'll do is whenever she's finished, that I'll give you all an opportunity to unmute your microphone. Don't, all at once, but if you have something to a question to ask or a comment, then unmute yourself, and as soon as you ask your question, then mute yourself again. So let's see if she's back with us yet.
Thanks so much, BJ, for your lesson. That was amazing, by the way. So grateful for you.
Thanks, Debbie.
Playing my phone then. I don't know why.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Wow, my power died on my hotspot. So sorry. Let's keep going. Okay, I yelled, Tim, and he came and helped. So empathy, it's a human need. It's not just a feminine thing. I can't tell you, I work mostly with couples, and one of the things that comes up often in my office is we're here for therapy because she doesn't feel like I get her, I understand her, I empathize with her. And one of the things that I do in working with couples is helping the husband actually recognize he needs empathy just as much as she does. He doesn't yet recognize it all the time. It's not just a female thing, it's a human need. I love this in Luke 7. We have from Jesus this perfect example. As he approached the gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the town was with her. And when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." This actual term here where it says the Lord saw her and his heart went out to her, heart went out to her is actually one word. I'm not even sure I say it right. Splagchnizomai. It's a big, long word that actually means his guts were moved. So he was moved at a gut level. This is what BJ was talking about. This is the purpose of today's class, is to set this clarity around what empathy is and how do we get there. It's literally our guts going, ugh. You know, like when you watch a movie or you hear someone tell their story, you know, and you just, you can feel that ache. That's literally what Jesus felt when he watched this woman go by, and who knows how far away they were. Jesus was constantly being touched, and he was actually on his way somewhere when he's seeing this. And yet he sees this situation and his heart's moved and he says, "Don't cry." This isn't, "Woman, stop crying." This is a heartfelt, "Oh, goodness." And then, of course, he goes and raises her son from the dead. I wish in every moment of empathy we had that kind of power. But I do think we have the ability to respond like Jesus. BJ, you said something so important. It's our heart of obedience that then develops empathy. I think I am genuinely, by nature, I'm not a sympathetic, empathetic person at all. I remember as a college student, I was studying the Bible with a woman who had been pushed downstairs while pregnant and lost her child. And she had a pretty serious disability even previous to that. And she's telling me her story, and we're studying the Bible together, and I'm listening to her story, and I go, so the next scripture we're going to look at is, I remember distinctly feeling bothered by my lack of empathy, that she would tell her story and I would be like, So the next thing we need to learn is that is me by nature. And it's so funny. I think God allowed me to become a therapist so that I could learn empathy. I mean, obviously, through the years of being a disciple, I have prayed about this from the day. I have prayed to be a loving person from the day that I became a Christian. Ooh, I get a little emotional even talking about it, because I'm just not naturally like that. And I'm just grateful that God has put so many good friends in my life who have said, Jennifer, I really don't feel like you care about what I'm sharing. And so over time, BJ talked about uncomfortable situations. Just over time, God has softened my heart so that I actually, when someone tells their story, I can feel a little bit of that, oof, that ache. And I tell you, becoming a therapist has been helpful. God's used it to help my heart change. Hearing again and again people's pain has been helpful, honestly, to my own heart. I think I want to be like Jesus. I think we just need to start praying to be like Jesus, and he will answer. He will help us. Just so you know, this is what the research actually says. So I as a therapist, I get to do lots of cool learning about research, and the actual definition of empathy, they've studied it a lot in the field of psychotherapy. The actual definition of empathy is perspective taking, which that literally means that's the getting in each other's shoes, where you can look out from their eyes and see. What we do know from research also, I love this, someone who is empathic has their own emotion regulation process that can soothe their personal distress at the other person's pain or discomfort, which makes it possible then to mobilize their compassion and helping behavior for the other person. One of the reasons that some of us have a hard time feeling empathy is that we get really, really reactive, or sometimes we have a hard time acting correctly or helpfully with empathy because we're so reactive. In other words, when your child or your spouse or family member or friend comes to you and they're upset with you and they're kind of coming up and you feel attacked, sometimes your own anxiety or defensiveness comes up. And what I actually teach my clients to do is to notice those emotions and take a breath. So even when someone's coming to you and it feels negative, but they're begging you for empathy, one of the first things that often needs to happen is notice your own emotional response and slow it down. That's self-soothing. I say take a breath first. You know, it's super helpful to soothe yourself, because then when you're in a spot of, okay, I'm feeling a little attacked here, I'm feeling a little defensive. Okay, maybe they're not saying it the best way in order to feel empathy for them, but I can set that aside and take a breath. And now I love this definition, because then once you recognize your own emotional distress, you can then set it aside enough to mobilize your own compassion and helping behavior. Now, that's also true when someone comes to you and you're feeling they're coming and they're sad and they're distressed and they're like this. Well, we have this thing called your mirror neurons, where literally when they come to you with their distress, you start to sometimes reflect their distress. You mirror their anxiety. So empathy includes this ability to be emotionally, to be stimulated, to simulate what you're seeing in the other's bodily experience. But sometimes that mirroring can be hard. It can be distressing. You get so emotional that it's hard to then mobilize into helpful, compassionate behavior. And so even when someone's coming to you for help. They're not now coming against you. They're coming to you distressed, and you're feeling distressed for them. Take a breath. Like everybody do it with me right now. In your nose, take a breath. And out your mouth. And do it again. In your nose. And out your mouth. When someone comes to you, either because they are upset with you but wanting your empathy, or because something hard is happening for them, and you're feeling empathy but having a hard time working through what you're feeling. Either situation, slow it down, take a breath. That will help you. And there's a lot of other things you can do, but the first part is the self-soothing. That will help you then be able to go into that helping behavior that you're wanting to do. The thing is with empathy, if it's such a good thing, how come some of us, myself included, have such a hard time doing it? Well, we each have different roadblocks. Because again, like I said, sometimes when you're the listener to what someone's sharing, if they are coming at you in any kind of an attacking way, you might feel wronged or hurt or offended. I love this scripture in Proverbs. An offended brother is more unyielding than the barred gates of a citadel in a fortified city. If someone comes to you strong, like, why didn't you take care of this? Don't you understand how hard this is for me? They come like that and you're feeling offended. It's really hard when you're defended and you become like those walls in this picture. It's really hard to feel empathy. So when we feel either under stress or duress or feel attacked, when we feel wronged or hurt or offended, sometimes that can get in the way of feeling empathy. This is really true in our marital relationships and in our family relationships. So when you're not in touch with your own emotions, like we just talked about, that you would need to self-soothe, that can get in the way of empathy. If that person approaches not only with, say, an attack, but what if they just go on and on and on and on, and it's hard to feel empathy when you're like you have a fire hydrant coming at you. So you might have somebody that, like BJ's talking about, people she works with, students she works with in your job or in your family or in the church. They come to you, and when they tell you their story, they don't say it in a couple sentences or even a paragraph. They say it in a chapter. They tell you the whole story, and it's just too many words. And so then empathy, that can be a roadblock to empathy. There's different things obviously you can do in that moment, which is, hey, hold on, and then just start reflecting what they're sharing. You can kind of break in, or you can have a conversation with that person about how when they use a ton of words, it's hard. But honestly, when somebody's really distressed, they might not be able to change any of their behaviors at that time. So you may need to just self-soothe when lots of words are coming to you. It's hard to stay in tune when that's the case. So it can be a roadblock. So I tell people, when a lot of words are coming to you, take a breath. And even if they're not letting you jump in with, oh, so this, oh, so that, you can do it inside your head. The other big roadblock that comes into play that stops people from feeling empathy is if they get caught in the facts. Like, well, you remember, you said this, and you're sitting there going, that's not exactly what I said. So we can get caught in the facts of the situation, and then we miss what's underneath it. Or if someone comes to you distressed about something that somebody else did, and you have some more knowledge about it, and you're like, that's not exactly what happened. We can get caught in that, and then we don't manage to really understand what the person's, the heart of the problem that they're coming to you with. So when those roadblocks come for you, the biggest thing I have people do is slow it down, take a breath, recognize them, and then your goal, okay, this is just a joke, I threw it in here. If you understood everything I said, you'd be me. It's really hard to thoroughly understand where someone's coming from. Jennifer, you're saying take their perspective and get in their shoes. I will never be able to really understand where somebody's at. And people throw that at me a lot. Like, you can't really understand because, you're not me. the thing is there is a way to build empathy skills. First of all, whether it's BJ's situation where people are coming in and sharing stories with her, or mine, or I'm a therapist, or you're just in a friendship relationship and they're coming, when people come to you with their struggles, they are taking a risk. It's very risky because you might not be caring, you might not be empathetic, you might not be patient, and you might write them off, you might dismiss them. They've had plenty of people do that. So they're really taking a risk. But also, you staying in the moment, especially a thing they're wanting empathy about is something you did. You staying in the moment is you taking a risk. So empathy is risky on both the person who's speaking and the person that's listening. And even when you ask for empathy, it's really risky. So again, take that breath. When someone comes to you, the first thing that I have people do is reflect. Meaning, what that looks like is you would say, so let's take a couple of BJ's examples. Oh, goodness. You had to sleep on top of a refrigerator. Okay, so you're just telling them back what they hear, what they've shared with you. Reflection actually helps you listen. If you reflect what someone else is saying, so I work so much with couples, comes and says, da, 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 da. That's why it's important when you're sharing, keep it to a couple sentences so that the person listening can go, oh, so when I this, you felt. And then go to open-ended questions. In the third week of this series, I'm going to go into more detail on how to do that. But I want to tell you the difference between open-ended and closed-ended. Closed-ended are, so is this what happened? And the person goes, yes or no. That's a closed-ended question versus, so how did that happen that you ended up sleeping on top of the refrigerator? So what was it that your wife said? What was it that your husband said? What was it that the brother, where did that, open-ended questions are just letting them tell some more of their story. So ask open-ended questions and then let them know that whatever they're going through is understandable. This is huge. Validate that what they're going, that must be so hard. That's a really difficult situation. It's actually not hard to validate somebody, at least at its initial stage, to be able to go, that's understandable. Inside yourself, if you're caught on the roadblocks here, if you're caught on the facts, it's going to be hard to validate. So set those facts aside and go, well, that's understandable. And then do your best to get in their shoes. So this is the part that is actually the hardest. So I'm going to give you an example in a relational kind of need for empathy. Someone, a brother or a sister comes to you, a family member comes to you, and they say, hey, when you did that, I felt really disrespected and dismissed by you. The way that you can let your gut be moved is there a time in your life, not with the person who's talking to you, but with somebody else out there, somebody else in your life, have you ever felt dismissed and disrespected? Oh gosh, yeah, last week with my boss, I presented this thing, or at church, I put this thing together and somebody responded this way and I felt dismissed and oh, that's what you felt from me. So now all of a sudden your gut's been moved because you can remember at a brain and a heart level what that feeling is like because you have felt it before. Getting in someone's shoes is a little bit of a practice. Often, in order to get in their shoes, the mistake a lot of disciples make is we share our own perspective really quickly. This is not, by the way, the same as sharing your perspective. Getting in their shoes is different, but we tend to share our perspective really quickly with not actually understanding what they're going through. So the open-ended questions are vital to make sure you really do understand what they're going through. And then when you can go, even if you don't share, oh, I can relate to that. Let's say it's in a work situation or another situation where you might not be able to say, oh, I can relate. This is what it was like for me. You can, though, in your mind go to that. Well, I can relate to that because this happened to me. And then all of a sudden you've gone from a mental cognitive understanding, and now you've gone to a gut level understanding, because you've been there. You've had something tough that happened to you, or some situation where you felt that way, and now you can get in their shoes. Again, that's going to come. Proverbs 20 verse 5 says that the purposes of a man's heart are deep waters, and a person of understanding draws them out. So first, draw it out, asking open-ended questions, say that is understandable, and then go to your own experience at a heart level. And now you've gone from just acknowledging it at a mental level to getting it at a gut level. So I'm the practical end of today. BJ was the heart of today. We do want to, with this information before you, give a chance. So I'm going to actually stop sharing. And James, if you want to go ahead and take over and open it up to whoever has questions of either of us about any of the stuff we've talked about today.
Great. So this is an opportunity to ask questions or make some kind of a comment, but it can be done by taking your microphone off. I've had a couple of suggestions for people to write it out in the chat, and then I will read it to them. Actually, I've got a couple of them have already been written here. And BJ, there are a couple of people were wanting you to share a little bit more about the poverty simulator. What does that entail? And so if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's called a day in my life. And what we've done is we've taken real life scenarios, and you have a stack of different cards. So you come in and you take on the persona of one of the students, whoever's card you choose. And you walk through the choices that they have to make during that day. So for instance, I get up this morning, I can either go to school without a uniform on and get sent back home, which is what will happen, or go to school in a dirty uniform that smells and everyone's gonna make fun of me. So right off the bat, the students have to make a choice. So you, as that student, you choose which one you're going to take. Let's say I'm gonna go ahead and wear the dirty uniform. And then that sends you to the next station. Okay, now I'm at school. All the kids are making fun of me and nobody wants to sit next to me. What do I do? Do I get angry and I start fighting with someone? Or do I go to the teacher who's heard this before? So you're faced with choice after choice after choice. So you walk through that student's day, and it gives you a chance to see that these students are carrying a lot more weight on their little shoulders than we are aware of. So when we, for instance, if it's teachers who are going through the simulator, if we look at these students and we're upset and frustrated because they don't have a pencil, or they're not staying alert, or they're not staying awake, we now understand a little bit more the why behind it so that we can address it differently.
Great. That's super helpful, even thinking about all of the different decisions that come when you start thinking about the other person's situation. That's excellent. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, Debbie?
Yeah, this is more for Jennifer. I think for me, I'm a pretty empathetic person, like, in the whole Myers-Briggs personality thing. That's more of who I am. And it's easy for me to be empathetic when I see someone as vulnerable, like BJ was talking about, like a kid who's in transition or something like that. That's easy. But empathy gets a lot harder for me when you talked about somebody having like a roadblock, or being, when I feel attacked, or there's too many words, or offended, like people who are not easy to love and have the empathy for. And so you said breathe and validate, but how do you Maybe you can explain that a little bit more without getting hooked.
Well, I think you actually need to recognize the hook first. A lot of the times we don't recognize we're hooked by the way they spoke, or we'll say, if she just said it differently, or, you know. And so the first thing is your own ability to go, I feel wronged right now. I feel attacked right now. I feel like they're throwing facts that aren't true around right now. So recognizing that and giving it some room is honestly one of the first things. We do know from studying empathy that a person actually has a harder time feeling empathy if they're not empathetic with their own feelings first. So our ability to have empathy is hugely affected by our ability to feel our own emotions. So that's actually where it starts. So that's what I mean by giving room for your own, ooh, I'm feeling hurt by how she's saying this right now. And then it is important to, your heart rate's usually up and your body's usually tense. So that's actually why the breath is important. The breath, literally your body is in a fight or flight mode. And so sometimes the breath isn't enough and you need to go for a walk. The reality is sometimes when we're super reactive, we're not able to come into empathy because we're feeling attacked. And so being able to take a break and go take a walk can sometimes be helpful. And that gives you a chance to pray and to ask God to help you be empathetic. It gives you a chance to call a friend, call a lifeline. It gives you a chance to go over scriptures about, I want to be an empathetic person. God, help me to be an empathetic person. So sometimes people need more than a breath, and they need an actual timeout where they leave the circumstances to breathe and to think and to pray. And then they can come back into this situation and listen with an empathy, listen with an understanding heart. Does that help answer that question?
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Another question that has come up is, how do I develop self-awareness to the condition of my own heart during an emotional conversation? It wasn't directed to either one of you, so.
Yeah, BJ, go first on that one.
I'm gonna hand that one over to Jennifer. Honestly, I don't know about necessarily in the moment, so I'll let Jennifer take that. But as far as just developing it along the way, is I've needed to surround myself with friends who will be honest with me. Jennifer spoke about this as well when she was sharing that we can deceive ourselves into thinking that we have an empathetic heart. And we can surround ourselves with people who would say that we do. But to have someone who's going to be honest with us, like my relationship with Jennifer, so, someone who's willing to call me out, someone who's really willing to pinpoint in detail the things that they see, that helps me. But I don't know about in the moment, so Jennifer, maybe you can take that.
And I'd like to, for you, can you go ahead and read that to me again? Because I want to make sure I'm answering specifically.
How do I develop self-awareness to the condition of my own heart during an emotional conversation?
Yes. So one of the things that I tell people to do, I'll just tell you, it's a very practical step I give people, is to start noticing. Not necessarily when you're in a thing with somebody, but just during your day, when you are in relationship with other people, or you're just going about your day, start noticing when you feel a tenseness in your body. So the body will often be the first thing that tells you you're feeling something. Sometimes we're not as cognitively aware of it, but our body will tell us that we are having a hard time. Literally the heart rate, or a tenseness, or a drop in the stomach, or even a flush to the face. So first of all, when you can't quite figure out what you're feeling, notice your body. When I'm working with people on emotion identification, the first place I go is when you feel, they'll say, I was really upset with so-and-so. when you felt that upsetness, where did you feel it in your body? And they'll go, my hands got tight, or my legs started to shake, or my throat got tight, or I feel it across my shoulders. So recognizing where you feel it in your body is a really important first step. And then that's where the breath comes in, taking a breath. Sometimes what will then help, what was I feeling in that moment? How come my heart rate got so fast? So as you go about your day, notice when you're at work and you hear your boss as they walk in the room and your heart rate kicks up and go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that is. Or when your kid walks in the door and shares something with you and you get that dropped feeling in your stomach. Huh, that's interesting. So first of all, noticing your body and then asking yourself, what happened for me there? And can I put any emotion words to it? I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling afraid. I'm feeling anxious. Oh, I was feeling anxious when my kids started talking to me. Oh, I felt some fear when I heard my boss's voice as they walked into the office. So first of all, taking time through your day of noticing your own emotions so that then when you're in a heightened situation with somebody and your heart rate goes up, you go, oh, there's that heart rate thing. Oh, there's that drop in the stomach sensation and then you start going, oh, I must be feeling my own, anxiousness or sad or angry or scared. And I'm going to take that breath. So that patience with your own emotions, honestly, somewhat starts through your day. I call it noticing, just noticing your emotion and taking that breath. And then when you're in a more conflictual situation, you can then practice that same ability of, oh, I'm feeling distressed right now. Well, that's understandable. Taking that breath and then being able to tune in. Again, this is that part that we talked about earlier. To tune into the other person is you have a higher possibility of doing that when you've done your own awareness of your emotions in other situations and now in this moment.
Okay, great. I think Rosa wants to ask a question here too.
I wanted to ask BJ. BJ, our group has been talking about helping out in the community, especially those that the kind of young students, the families that you're describing. And we have been racking our brain. Mark knows this, he's on, and we're all trying to come up with realistically, what can our group do? We're ready. We want to serve. BJ, if you have any suggestions for us as disciples to step it up and really do our part.
Well, they're everywhere. Like I said, they are invisible, but they're there. So I'm not necessarily aware to point you in San Diego. I can look and find out. I'm here in Reno, so I know where to send people in Nevada. I do know that we have people in LA, we have people in Orange County, so I'm sure there are places within San Diego as well. So let me take a look and then I'll get back to your website.
Okay, great. I have another one here. How do you differentiate between lack of empathy and apathy?
Come on, BJ. Got that one?
That's that's a hard one because honestly, apathy is I can personalize it. Apathy, I reached a point in my own life I just didn't care anymore. And that's just being honest. I was like, you know what? I'm fed up. I'm done. I hear you. I see your pain. I'm sorry for you. I don't have anything left in me to give to you. I think that's the apathy. I could be wrong in the definition, but that's the point I had reached. And that's what God grabbed a hold of and said, you're going to take this and we're going to develop this into what I want it to be. I need you to re-engage your heart. Apathy is when we disengage our hearts. We see the problem. We see the pain, But because stepping into that pain is too painful for us personally, we choose to disassociate with it. I believe that's what apathy is. That's the space I found myself in for years until God stepped in and I had to say yes to the obedience, to the call of where he was trying to push me in order to get to empathy.
You know, I was just going to say as well, I think apathy is somewhat a little bit more cognitive than gut. And so you can actually change apathy a bit easier, honestly, than empathy, as in apathy is a lack of interest. And so what BJ said was so huge. Put yourself in the uncomfortable situations. And all of a sudden, your interest, your heart gets moved when you watch what people are going through. So honestly, I do think apathy is pretty changeable by putting yourself, by making yourself become interested in, by taking the effort and the time to put yourself in situations so that you can learn. Again, I think then what switches that is when you start asking people questions. Early on, BJ and I, one of the things that she really helped me with early on, and well, no, about midway in our relationship, in the years we've known each other, is I was taking some diversity classes and learning about white privilege and learning about racial issues. And so BJ was somewhat BJ, I have some questions for you. BJ, can you teach me about this? BJ, can you help me with this? So I shared with her about, we had to do this, assignment for class where we had to interview somebody who was of a different race and a different gender than ourselves and write about it. So I'm in a family that has so many people from differing backgrounds. So I actually interviewed 3 brothers who were all Hispanic, and I asked them their story. The thing that hit me about these brothers is I had known them each for about 10 to 15 years. And when I asked their story, and they told me what happened when they were growing up, and they told me what happened at their work that week. Just different, what I would say are microaggressions, different things that would happen racially during their week. And it would happen that week. One of the brothers that I was interviewing, literally, he had some things happen at work. And I was like, and I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't asked the questions. And the questions were from an assignment I was given. So then after I asked these 3 brothers and I wrote it up, it hit me. I've known them for this long and I didn't know these things about them. So sometimes apathy can be that we haven't put ourselves in a circumstance where we learn about what someone's gone through. So I would say put yourself in circumstances and then ask people questions, let them tell you their story. And then God does this thing where he works on our heart. And so I would say, I think we can actually create change by putting ourselves in circumstances and then drawing it out, and then we can grow.
Great. So we've got about 3 more questions here. So let's, I guess, used our last minutes here. One is, I work in healthcare, dealing with difficult patients all day long. How do I keep myself from getting hard-hearted toward them?
That's a question for Jennifer.
Okay, it is a question for me because it happens. What's really great is as a therapist, it's usually a good idea to be in consultation groups where I can tell other therapists, I don't like that my client, and literally, like, I feel bad about that. But it happens to me where I just get tired of it's usually a certain situation, and then they do it again, and then they do it again, and then they do it again. And I'm like, what are you thinking? So my own irritation or sometimes my own background, I will work sometimes with addiction, and there's addiction in my family background, and the stuff I went through with my father will come up where I'll feel stuff towards the person that's in front of me because of my own background, or maybe I just had a rough week and I'm just feeling really irritated right now. And so I'm not as patient and kind. So I actually need people around me. So if you're in the medical profession and in the helping field, in any kind of helping field, I would say be in a group where you can talk about that. So that's literally what happened. I had a couple that I was working with, and one of the partners, I was like, I could feel it inside of myself. I felt irritated with him. I felt like I've kind of had enough. I don't really want to keep talking to him. And I was like, I'm not supposed to feel this. I'm a therapist. And so I had a consultation group the following week, and I brought it up. It was kind of embarrassing to bring it up, but everybody was great. They were like, oh my goodness, I can relate. This is what helps me. They gave me some really good input. So I would say if you're in a helping profession and you're noticing what we would call burnout or compassion fatigue, where your ability to feel compassion is really impacted by the kind of work that you do, you yourself need to get some more support. Either in a group, or get your own therapy, or go to a community group, or make sure that you're with a group of disciples that can, we need to create some of these. Let's have compassion groups where we can help each other, because honestly, people in the ministry will feel compassion fatigue, people in helping fields will. So having support for that is pretty vital for anybody professionally.
Great. Another question is, do you think men not feeling empathy has to do more with culture or biological makeup?
Got some thoughts on that, BJ?
Well, I think that's yours. When you mentioned that it wasn't a feminine thing, you had it even in your PowerPoint. So I think that's on you.
Well, I think it is a human need, male and female. But actually, I think our culture doesn't support that men have it as a need as well. Our culture says it's a feminine thing, it's a female thing. And our culture doesn't really most cultures, and it's interesting because I get to teach and do therapy all over the world, and it doesn't matter where I am, this is a fact, that the ability to express emotion, to feel emotion, express emotion, and then empathy is tied to that, isn't emphasized for men in most cultures. So it's not that there is some kind of like men don't need it thing. It's that culture often affects the ability for men to have a space to say how they feel. And so that affects their ability to have empathy. So I do think that I don't think it's biological at all, because I think God actually created all of us and he did a really good job at it. And so I think we all have a need for empathy, and we all have the capability to show empathy. But I do think culture has an impact on our ability to build the skills for empathy.
Okay, very good. Another one is, can you give advice to help develop empathy in young children, and ideas on activities to lead people to grow in empathy?
There you go, BJ.
I would say, as far as building in a young children, I think it's important to have kids around kids that are not like themselves. I think we've isolated our children in a way that when they come across someone who maybe doesn't smell so good, their response is as offensive as their parents' response is. But to be able to put them in situations and talk through those situations and have devotionals on those situations, I think that's the thing that we need. That's really going to change the face of what we're dealing with just as a country. When we isolate our children from the problem, they have no skills in dealing with the problem years from now. And I see that not just with empathy, but just raising my own kids. I did everything possible to shelter them from the hard stuff. But then once they went off to college, they weren't equipped to deal with the hard stuff. Realizing now I should have done differently. I should have actually exposed them somewhat so that I could then guide them through, how am I going to deal with this? What would be a better response? And I think it's really the same thing when it comes to how do I expose my kids to empathy? I bring them into situations with me so they can see me dealing with it. Then they're not afraid of it. they don't come across someone very different from them, and they don't see them as aliens and strangers from another world. Instead, they're like me, only different than me. So I think that's going to be the answer as far as how to expose them to it, is take them with you, let them see it. Don't cover their eyes. You know, that contributes to these people are invisible. They don't deserve to be seen.
Excellent.
And I think children are very able, especially young children, but then even as they grow, I obviously here I'm thinking this is from someone as a child, as a parent, but this can happen in schools. There actually are some great programs in schools for teaching empathy. BJ's obviously talking about one that she does, and as a therapist, I literally have sat with kids on the playground, and we've watched and talked about what might be happening for this kid. They often don't know how to read facial expressions or body language, and so you can actually teach a child to start paying attention to those things. We've literally sat either in my office or on the playground or in a school classroom, because I worked as a school counselor, and just helping them think through, what do you think they felt. There's all kinds of games that you can buy to really build empathy. There's these really simple, really cool games that you can play. You can also buy, there are these communication card games that you can use with kids. So there's lots of really amazing tools out there. In fact, I should probably look up a list and send it to you, James, and you can send it out, that can really help children. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Comment here is, I have been a court-appointed special advocate for youth for over 8 years in San Diego County. Thank you for sharing that. And then another person gave an suggestion for a book. It's called Permission to Feel by Mark Brackett. That's a great resource. I don't know if either of you have read it, or if you have other resources you would like to suggest.
Yeah. There's the help. These are some simple books. They're called Help Me Be Good for children. It's this series on a lot of different behavioral things, and they're all drawings of beautiful drawings. So the Help Me Be Good books are super helpful. Honestly, on a simple level, if you have a children's Bible and they'll have, drawings, the kind that have drawings, you can use those drawings to teach biblical stories and show them. My favorite was always David and Jonathan, and Jonathan is giving David his, his shield and his sword and his cloak, and you see both their faces. And we spent time even with our kids just showing them, what do you think was happening there? So
Amen. Well, it's time for us to go ahead and finish here. We've been an hour and a half. Thank you guys so much, both BJ and Jennifer. Please look on the chat, because lots of people have expressed their gratitude to you both. And we want you to know that this has been so helpful, so encouraging, challenging also, but to look deeper into the scriptures, deeper into our hearts, and to open ourselves to the people around us. And so personally, I'm super grateful for you both sharing your hearts, sharing your experience. I'd like for us to finish with a prayer. And then, one other question that was asked was if these are going to be if these are recorded. So it is recorded, and we are going to post it. However, I don't know exactly where it's going to be posted yet. So as soon as we post it, I will send you guys out the link so that you can have access to it later.
And James, if I can just mention, if anybody has any specific questions about anything that we've talked about, feel free to send me an email, Jennifer Conzen, just my name, at yahoo.com, jenniferconzen@yahoo.com.
Excellent. Okay, let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you once again, because you have empathy for us. You sent Jesus, and Jesus became a human being just like us, so that he can sympathize and relate to each one of us. Father, give us that same heart that's willing to open ourselves up and risk being accused or attacked or just felt uncomfortable. Father, help us to learn to ask good questions, to appreciate the people around us and the differences. Father, I pray that we will be more like you as a result of this series. And we pray, Father, that you will use it so that we're strengthened as a church, we're strengthened in our families, and we're strengthened as we be a light to this world. Thank you once again for BJ and for Jennifer. We ask that you bless their lives, their families, and their ministries. And it's in Christ's name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Have a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.